It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, but joining me for the final preview show of the 2020-2021 season is the main man himself, the headliner of the preview show, Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, welcome.
Hello, Natalie. Yes, last preview of the season. It's been a strange long old season, hasn't it?
It really has, and we're slightly in party mode, I think, today, because it's. Well, I feel a bit party mode when we get to the last podcasts of the season, mainly because we're looking forward to a nice long summer where we don't have to do anything. But also, I do feel a little bit of sadness that it comes to an end and our little routine's over, and obviously we all take a break over the summer. But we got there, Dave. A season during a pandemic, a season during lockdown, a season without fans in the stadium apart from that one game, and we've made it. We've made survival, and we've made we've got to a pre-season to start another season in the Premier League. So all good. So basically, on that theme, I've got to ask you the most important question of all: how did it feel to be in the ground on Wednesday night?
It was unusual, the process to queue to get in and all the checks that were going on. And to be fair, the club handled that really well. I thought that was kind of really well handled. You know, they were handing out the packs for people as well. I thought that was really well done. Admittedly, with small numbers, you think, how's that going to work when it's scaled up with that level of scrutiny? I'm not too sure, but it's obviously been a test event for them. They've been able to learn something from that, hopefully. And then, obviously, once into the ground, into your seat, and the players coming out, and it was unusual. I thought it was a little bit like, at times, a bit like an early rounds League Cup game. Obviously, in terms of the numbers, it's probably not too dissimilar to what we've had maybe 10 years ago. But there were times when the crowd did really get up for it, and other times when it was a little bit flat. But I guess that's to be expected with only 3,500 in there. But grateful to be there, really.
Yeah, that's super interesting that you say that, actually, because I had completely the opposite feeling. I was, and this is perhaps not a great surprise for people who know me, but I was just like childlike giddy all the way through, like from getting in there. It didn't feel, I didn't get a feeling of flatness at any point, but I wonder whether that's dependent on where we were sat, because where I was sat, there were a lot of people around me vocal all the way through the game. That moment when the team came out from under the tunnel and everybody, that was the first time we heard any crowd noise and everybody got on their feet. I literally got goosebumps all over me. It was just amazing. And I think that triggered people doing. But obviously, I thought during the game that there was like decent songs being sung, and I did wonder whether there would be a slight feeling of self-consciousness, because it is always a little bit more awkward to chant and sing at football games when there's nobody else. You know, you're not doing it en masse, isn't you? But I just wonder whether that felt like a slightly different experience depending on where you were sat. But the game itself, obviously being there, I thought the game itself was a irrespective of the result, Dave, was a cracking performance from our boys.
Yeah, I thought we did really well the first half, really resolute defensively, and then just a shame to concede when we did. And then when the second goal went in early in the second half, you thought, well, yeah, it's going to be a long way back from that. I mean, we did have chances. Chris Wood had a really good chance. I think he just kind of sliced it slightly, didn't he? And Dwight had a good chance as well in the first half. So we did have those chances, and then in the end, Liverpool, I think, were deserved winners. I don't think we can complain about the result in the end.
Yeah, we can. I'd like to complain about it. I did quite like the fact that Liverpool got booed all the time, and in the wake of the ESL nonsense, I would be quite happy if all 6 of those clubs at every single game, all of next season, get booed relentlessly. That would be nice. If we could keep that up, that would be great. I think for me, it just felt like the team had been lifted a little bit, having the fans there. I agree with all that you said there. I think it was absolutely the right decision to play 4-5-1. I think that the five lads in defence in midfield managed to keep that their midfield relatively quiet. And I think probably Liverpool's their midfield was probably their weakest bit. I think. I didn't think I thought we nullified that very well. It's just when you go 4-5-1, you're going to really struggle to try and convert those chances. But it was a good performance. I was really pleased with it. Disappointing to lose 2 out of the 2 games that we've played post Fulham. I do hope we win against Sheffield United. If more than anything, I'd quite like to not finish 17th, which I appreciate sounds a bit of a cheek, given that I've been saying all season that I'd happily finish 17th. But of course, that was mainly just so we survived. But now we've done it, I would quite like to finish not 17th. Albeit, Dave, as you and I said before we started recording, even though it's 17th, to be potentially 11 points clear of 18th tells its own story, doesn't it? So.
It could be more than that, couldn't it?
It could be more than that if we win and they lose. Yeah, it's going to be more than that. So it's quite a big gap. So yeah, all good. We were there. Listeners, I'd quite like to listen. I'd quite like to hear from those of you who were there. I've seen quite a lot of stuff on social media, but I'd be quite interested to hear some real specifics and real details of what it felt to be back on turf, and I guess what you think the club's going to do next season to try and handle the larger season ticket crowds that get in there, and depending on what the landscape looks like in August. So do drop us a line and let us know. Before we move on to previewing the final game of the season then, Dave, we have a quiz question that we need to give an answer to. Now, at the end of the last preview show, which was of course Liverpool at home, we left you with this question. Prior to the Premier League era, who was the last Burnley player to score a winning goal in a home league victory over Liverpool? Now, I did make a comment on that previous show that I suspected that we would need to go quite a way back in time for this one, Dave. So why don't you let our listeners know what the answer was?
Yeah, well, the correct answer, if anyone's interested, was Ray Hankin. That was in a 2-1 win, and that was way back on Boxing Day 1973. And to clarify this, we were looking for our last home league win prior to the one in 2016, which we had mentioned in that preview show. Interestingly, Peter Noble, Derek Scott, and also Jimmy Traore with an own goal had all scored winning goals in cup victories over Liverpool at Turf Moor in the interim. But it was league games we wanted to hear about, and Ray Hankin was the answer we needed.
Excellent. Did we get any correct answers, Dave? I'm going to suggest that there were few and far between with this one.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we stumped quite a few of you, including some of our quiz regulars. But there'd been a huge clue earlier in the show when we did that last preview, because it's the same match that was featured in Jan's Matchday Memory, and he didn't mention the name of the player, Ray Hankin. Anyway, the only correct answers we had were from It's a Walsh Thing on Twitter and also John Robertson.
It is, and can we please give a shout out to one regular quizzer who didn't quite get, well, he did get the answer there, but had a few goals at getting it, who you won't give him credit for the correct answer, but can we give him a shout out anyway, Dave? Because it's for Adrian
Kate. Adrian Caton had a guess and then had a second guess and guessed 2. So yeah, if you say I'm being strict and not allowing that, I'm
third attempt, probably pushing it a little far, Adrian, but Adrian is a fan of the show and does contribute regularly, so I did want to give him a shout out. And also, Adrian, thank you very much for your email that you did send in to us this week. We haven't forgotten about it. We've just been a little bit tied up in answering correspondence this week, so we will reply to you. But Adrian did drop us an email this week, which we do need to reply to. So if you listen to this, Adrian, we have not forgotten you. We will be in touch. So what's happening now, Dave? Are we going to have a quiz question this week? Are we not? What's the crack here?
Well, this is the 38th and final preview show of the season. We've previewed every Premier League game during the season, but we didn't want to leave our listeners in suspense over the summer, so sadly we don't have a quiz question for you this time. But there may be some news soon on a quiz-related project we're hoping to get off the ground during the summer, so stay tuned over the summer for that.
You little tease, Dave, you little tease.
Opposition stats!
Okay, well, let's move on to previewing the game, because that is why we are, of course, here. It is the final game of the Premier League season. It is Sheffield United away, Sunday the 23rd of May at 4 p.m. kickoff, which is live on BT Sport 3. BT Sport 3? Is that a thing, Dave?
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, all the games are covered. They're all kicking off at the same time, so they've got to spread them across the channels. I think Sky have got more than BT have got. But yeah, we've been relegated. BT have got 3 games, and we're on BT Sport 3. So I guess that tells you what the priority amongst the broadcasters is. But perhaps it's not a huge surprise with a relegated team against a team that's safe. It's pretty much safe to say that it's a perfect definition of a dead rubber, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have any problems with that. I don't think anybody outside of Sheffield or Burnley will be tuning into that game. So we get to watch it. That's the main thing. Why don't you kick us off then, Dave, with a recent history of this fixture, please, and tell us all about the opposition.
Yeah, well, in terms of all-time away trips to play Sheffield United, Burnley have only won 6 times in 61 attempts. But our threshold for defining recent history in this section throughout the season has been games played since Burnley's Wembley playoff final victory in 2009, which was, of course, against Sunday's opponents, Sheffield United. Burnley have only played twice at Bramall Lane since our first promotion to the Premier League. That was once in the 2010-11 season. That's after we'd returned back to the Championship after just one season back in the top flight. And then again, we played there last season as well. With 1 draw and 1 defeat, we certainly won't be spoiling the surprise for our highlight section by giving you details of these 2 most recent results. The match in October 2010 was a thriller. After a goalless first half, Burnley went into a 2-goal lead. That was thanks to goals from Dean Marney and Chris Eagles, before Daniel Bogdanovic pulled one back. And with just 10 minutes to play, a rare goal from Blades defender Matt Lowton levelled the scores at 2-2. Before Jay Rodriguez scored what most people thought was a 90th minute winner. But there was still time for Mark Yates to net an equaliser past Brian Jensen to make it 3-3. The corresponding fixture from last season was rather more one-sided, as clinical finishing from a rampant and confident Blades side earned them a 3-0 win, in what was another disappointing trip over to South Yorkshire for the travelling Clarets fans.
Good stuff.
Highlights and lowlights.
Well, we've got highlights and we've got lowlights of this fixture, obviously. You've decided this week to go with a lowlight first in reverse order. What's this all about?
Right, well, for our lowlight, we're going back to when Stan Turnett was Burnley manager in the early days of Burnley's time back in the Championship, when it was still being referred to as Division 1, before it had even become the Championship. After a 2-0 defeat at Bramall Lane in April 2001, which all but ended Burnley's chances of making it to the end-of-season playoffs, we returned to Bramall Lane again almost a year later, in March 2002. Burnley had a magnificent first half of the season, and we were still top of the table at the end of December, but the wheels had started to come off since the new year, and not even the signing of Paul Gascoigne could halt the decline. The 3-0 defeat at Bramall Lane was yet another disappointment. 2 goals from 19-year-old Phil Jagielka, who back then was playing as a striker, and another for Laurent Jaffo, sealed the victory for the hosts. Unfortunately, Gazza was a shadow of his former self, and Burnley looked devoid of ideas for most of the game, with another loanee, David Johnson, being perhaps the only bright spot. After this, Burnley's patchy form continued, and inexplicably we failed to even make it to the playoffs after being in the box seats halfway through the campaign.
That is a low light. Ooh, cheer us up, Dave. Give us a highlight.
Yeah, well, our last win at Bramall Lane is our highlight for this last preview show of the season, and for that we have to go back to December 2008. Prior to this match, we just discovered that Burnley would face Spurs in the Carling Cup semi-final over 2 legs, following a sensational midweek win against Arsenal in the quarter-final at Turf Moor. Back to the Blades game, though, and Martin Patterson gave Burnley the lead in the first half, before the 2 teams traded penalties, with James Beattie equalising before the ever-dependable Graham Alexander put Burnley back ahead from the spot before the break. Chris Eagles' goal in the second half extended Burnley's lead before Stephen Quinn narrowed the gap near the end, but Burnley hung on for a 3-2 win. This was the first of 3 victories over the Blades that season. The other 2 were by a 1-0 scoreline, with Martin Patterson netting the only goal in a 1-0 win at Turf Moor in April, followed by Wade Elliott's wonder strike at Wembley at the end of the following month.
God, that period in our history, Dave, feels like both a lifetime ago and yesterday all at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's, 12 years, isn't it now?
It does, but it was such, like, that whole time that started the new era of Burnley between, because even though we did go down for a couple of seasons, that 2009 promotion was our first, top flight football, and, it started with, losing him and then getting, what's he called who left?
Brian Laws.
No, Eddie Howe. I have a problem. I always, whenever managers leave us, I tend to leave my memory. I commit them to the memory banks that are never to be recovered. And then obviously getting Dyche and stuff. But it also, it's the start of our current new era. Is all of that time. It just feels like it was only yesterday, but also a lifetime ago.
Heroes and villains.
My favourite section then for the last time this season, Dave, is of course the heroes and villains. I have no idea who you've picked here because I tend to not look at the script because I like to be surprised. Who have you picked for our hero?
Right, well, when we preview matches, we usually take into account previous games, either at home or away, so the rare occasions that teams meet at neutral venues are usually overlooked. Bearing in mind we don't have a wide choice of potential heroes from past matches played against Sheffield United at Bramall Lane, and with just 4 wins there in 34 visits since the Second World War, we're going to bend the rules just slightly so that we can include a match between the two teams which was played on a hot sunny day in May 2009 at the new Wembley Stadium. The start of Burnley's Premier League journey can be pinpointed to a memorable goal by this week's hero. Wade Elliot, whose carefully pressed shot into the top corner of the net gave Blades goalkeeper Paddy Kenny no chance. Despite putting Burnley ahead in just the 13th minute, this was enough to ensure a 1-0 win and provide Burnley fans with a first taste of top-flight football since 1976. I hope that you'll allow us the extra leeway we've taken to ensure that Wembley hero and club legend Wade Elliot can be our hero for this episode.
Definitely. I don't want to say it because I would quite like to end on that one. We should maybe swap these around because that's a nice feeling. But go on, who have you picked as our villain?
Well, it links in, so going back to that playoff final briefly, 2 Sheffield United players were sent off. Substitute Jamie Ward received 2 yellow cards for 2 deliberate handballs within 5 minutes, and he got his marching orders from Mike Dean. And another substitute, Lee Hendry, was shown a straight red card after the final whistle for something he said to Mike Dean. But this week's villain is the only Sheffield United player, to my knowledge, who's been sent off in a match between the Blades and Burnley at Bramall Lane. The match was an FA Cup third-round tie in January 1993. And the player in question, and our villain this week, is Adrian Littlejohn, who, after being fouled by Adrian Heath, who clearly pulled him back, decided to lash out. There could be no complaints about Littlejohn's dismissal for violent conduct, although quite why Adrian Heath followed him down the tunnel remains somewhat of a mystery. So for a red mist that led to his own red card, but also the dismissal of an opponent, Adrian Littlejohn is our villain this week.
I still, to this day, cannot hear the words Adrian Heath without, in my head, chanting Adrian Heath's Claret and Blarney and putting real emphasis on Heath. It's a song that's just, can never do it to this day. Finally then, Dave, who's our referee for the game? Who's going to be our man in the middle?
We've got Kevin Friend of Leicester. He's going to be in charge of our last match of the Premier League season at Bramall Lane. He's been in the middle for 2 matches at Turf Moor this season, as well as our home win over Crystal Palace in November. He refereed our defeat at the hands of Manchester United in January. He had the whistle for also the other game he's been in charge of this season. It was our 4-0 away defeat to Spurs at the end of February. He's been around for quite a while, and he will celebrate his 50th birthday in July. He first took charge of a Burnley match against West Ham at the end of the 2004-05 season. And in his 27 previous games involving Burnley, we've won 9, drawn 5 and lost 13. Our only Premier League away win, with Kevin Friend as referee, was the 2-0 victory at already relegated Norwich City towards the end of last season, in which he reduced the home side to 9 men during the first half. Video assistant referee down at Stockley Park will be Lee Mason. It was announced earlier this week that Lee Mason was to retire from on-field activities at the end of the season, and he refereed his final match at Old Trafford on Tuesday evening for Man United's 1-1 draw with Fulham. However, he is being kept on as a full-time video assistant referee from next season.
Yeah, that's good stuff. It's quite an interesting thing now for referees, isn't it? Because with the introduction of VAR, the end of their on-field career is not necessarily, they've now got career options that explain, because unfortunately, it looks like VAR's here to stay, but good stuff.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Well, I don't know what we're going to do here, Dave, because normally at this part of the season, we invite you to treat our listeners to a bonus stat of the week, because we know you like to treat them. Are you going to keep that trend for the final podcast of the season?
Of course, yes.
Ah, go on.
We do have a stat of the week. We couldn't leave without a stat of the week.
Of course not.
But for a change, this week's Stat of the Week relates to the venue for Burnley's final Premier League match of the season this Sunday. Bramall Lane is best known these days as a football ground, but for over 100 years, from 1855 to 1973, it was also a venue for cricket. It's one of only two venues, the other being the Oval, to host England football internationals as well as England cricket test matches. Although the Oval has also hosted England rugby union matches back in the 19th century, Bramall Lane is scheduled to be a venue for England's match against Greece this autumn in the 2021 Rugby League World Cup. But this Sunday, it will once again be hosting Premier League football, although with the Blades relegation already confirmed, who knows when Bramall Lane will do so again.
Yeah, that is a good stat of the week indeed. So how are we feeling about the game, Dave? We don't actually have an opposition view this week, and it's probably unsurprising that our friends down the road at Sheffield United are probably a little bit fed up with this season, don't really want to participate in anything and just want to get the season over with and start again next year. So we couldn't quite get anybody on to get themselves excited to come and speak to us. So it's just down to you and me, Dave. How are we feeling? Surely this is one where we feel like we can get a win.
On paper it is. When you look at their season to date, I think they've actually won more games than Fulham and West Brom. They've won 6, but they've only drawn 2, so their points total is in the doldrums, and they've lost a lot of matches this season. So on paper, it should be a good chance for Burnley to get a win at a bogey ground, as we've mentioned already, which is not a happy hunting ground for Burnley over the years. But perhaps this is one where the fans will make a difference. I think they're allowed to have just over 5,000 fans in at Bramall Lane. They'll no doubt be belting out the Chip Butty song prior to kick-off, getting their team up for it. And it's a chance, maybe with their last game, no pressure on, to prove what they're capable of and what they're going to do next season. So I think it'll be a difficult one from that point of view. I think it's one where maybe if Burnley score first to get a first-half goal, that might put a different reflection on it. I think if Sheffield United score first, that might give them a boost, particularly with 5,000 fans behind them on the day as well.
Yeah, that's true actually. I'm always very worried about playing relegated sides at the end of the season, because it's almost like stats go out of the. But I don't really want to say that to Statman Dave, because obviously this is a stat show. But it does feel a little bit sometimes like, all bets are off, and sometimes they play with that freedom, don't they? That gives them. Just that extra mile to be able to win something. So I'm a little bit worried, but I still think we're going to win. I think we will want to finish on a high and finish up that table. So I am going to predict a 2-0 win for the Clarets, Dave, with Chris Wood and Ben Mee scoring. And I'm going to keep saying Ben Mee until Ben Mee scores with his header. What is your goal scoreline prediction, please, Dave?
I'm going to predict a win, because if you can't predict a win against a team that's bottom of the table, already relegated, when are you going to predict one? So I'm going to think it's going to be closer. I'm going to go for 2-1. I'm going to go for, I think we're going to be back to 4-4-2. I'm going to go for Wood and Vidra.
Excellent. Well, listeners, let us know what you think the score prediction is going to be. We want scorers, and how they scored, please. Left leg, right leg, header, bottom, we don't care, but let us know what you think we're going to do. You can tweet us at nonaynever, or you can email us at podcast@nonaynever.net. Very quickly before we move on to the closing weeks of the FPL, Dave, what's our injury situation looking like, and team news?
I think it's pretty much as you were. We knew already that Robbie Brady and Kevin Long were pretty much going to be out for the season. Dale Stevens had kind of had an injury and he'd been ruled out. Phil Barsley, we knew already, had an operation on a hernia. Nick Pope was the only one that was kind of like that. You're not too sure. Obviously, he didn't play the last couple of games, but the way they're talking, it's sounding like he may well be back in for Sunday, but that's not certainly. When Sean Dyche says they touch and go, they're usually more likely to be not than in. So I guess we'll have to wait and see an hour before kick-off. We'll find out at 3:00 on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, good stuff. Great. Well, there we go. Final game of the season, listeners. Exciting. Good to see the back of this season, but exciting to get a summer under our belts, Euros, and another Premier League campaign. So we're going to leave that on a high.
Fantasy Premier League update.
And then finally, Dave, second half of the show, we have the Known and Never FPL update. Game weeks 36 and 37 have been completed. So why don't you kick us off with a league update as to how we are looking going into that final game.
Ooh, it's getting exciting now. As we know, there's been a heavy schedule of matches as we approach the end of this unusual Premier League season. But we do have some updates for you regarding the completion of Game Week 36 last weekend and then the midweek matches, which comprise Game Week 37. So for our final preview show of the season, we're going to run down the current top 5 managers in the No Nay Never league table, who realistically are probably the only ones still in with any chance of becoming the overall winner for this season. So our top 5, in 5th place, we've got Gary Proctor with 2,397 points. 4th place is Chris Stanworth with 2,409. We've then got in 3rd place Ursay with 2,410. A jump up to 2,422. We've got Adam Dennett in 2nd place. And our leader still, it's been there for a while, is Sean Danaher with 2,434. So he's only got a very narrow lead of just 12 points ahead of 2nd place going into the last round of matches.
How close is that? That is just what I wanted going into the final game of the season, to be so close. And obviously, of course, we've had both Adam and Sean on the previous show. It's almost like we knew this was going to happen, Dave. It's almost like we're psychic. So that's going to be really good because we've got a vested interest in either one of them winning because they're both great fans of the show and they're both really superb lads. So we both really enjoyed having them on as guests. So I'm really pleased it's between them two, looking like it is anyway, and that they are so close. I cannot wait to see how they do it. What about you and me, Dave? How's Team Known and Never doing?
Well, for those still interested, my Burnley Stats team has now broken into the top 100 for the first time this season. I'm in 98th place on 2,035 points, and I'm only 25 points behind Richard Steele, who's led our podcasters mini league within a league for pretty much the entire season. Natalie, you're in 219th place, so I've gone up a few places.
Good.
On 1,612. So that's just over 400 points needed to catch me up before Sunday.
Easy. Nothing to see here. And who's I'm assuming Richard Steele's still the head of the rest of the No-Nay.
Yeah, he's topping our league. He's just 25 points ahead of me, so there's still an outside chance that I might have a really good week. And is it maybe a bit like playing Manchester City? They've got to have a terrible week, and you've got to have a really good week to have any chance of beating them. So that's how I'm approaching Sunday. Okay,
that's fair enough. Well, we also should have Kings of Game Weeks 36 and 37 to catch up on as well, don't we, Dave?
We do, yeah. We've got 2 sets. We've got the ones from last weekend, which was 36, and the midweek, which was 37. So I'll read through those. We've got for game week 36, we've got a 4-5-1 formation. We had Ramsdale in goal. Sheffield United goalkeeper getting into the team. That's not happened too many times this season. Our defence is Mitchell, Crystal Palace, Jack Robinson of Sheffield United, Cancelo of Man City, Alioski of Leeds. Midfield was Torres of Man City, Jack Harrison of Leeds, Højbjerg of Tottenham, Tell at Southampton, and Eze of Crystal Palace, who unfortunately he was doing really well for me. He got injured, so I've had to transfer him out. But he got 10 points. He was in the team for game week 36. And then Rodrigo of Leeds was the solo striker. And I think the highest scoring player overall for game week 36 was Ferran Torres. Scored a hat-trick, of course. Got 20 points. He's a high scorer for game week 36. And then for game week 37, so these were the midweek matches, we had Casilla of Leeds in goal. He was obviously swapped in, had a game after Melier playing most of the season. We had in defence, we had 4 defenders. We had Andy Robertson of Liverpool and Nat Phillips, 2 Liverpool defenders in there. We had Brian of Fulham and Rudiger of Chelsea. We then had, again, we had 5 midfielders. We had Pepe of Arsenal, Willock of Newcastle, Jorginho of Chelsea, Foden of Man City and Trossard of Brighton. And Patrick Bamford was the lone striker in that 4-5-1 formation for game week 37. It looks like the high scorers were Andy Robertson and Nicolas Pepe. They both had 15 points for game week 37.
Good stuff. The final section then on the Known and Never FPL is the opposition 3 to watch, where, Dave, you pick 3 players from our next opponents who are the players we need to keep an eye on based on their FPL points. Who have we got this week?
So the players to look out for, the highest point scorers for Sheffield United throughout the entire season, were Aaron Ramsdale. So perhaps it's a little bit surprising. They've not had the best of seasons, but their goalkeeper is the highest scoring player with 114. Respectable score. And then we're down into just double figures for the next 2. We've got David McGoldrick on 91 and John Fleck with 68. It's been a season to forget for Sheffield United after a really solid season back in the Premier League last season, and they'll be looking to bounce straight back next season, back in the Championship.
Indeed. Well, that's it, Dave. That is a Known and Never Fantasy Premier League season done, and it's just one game now for our top 2 managers to close out that victory. How do we leave that, Dave? How do we summarise that?
Well, obviously, we won't have another preview show to update you on what's happened, but I think we do have plans to have an end of season review, and may well roll in the FPL update into that, or possibly even have a separate one. We'll see how it goes in the last game of the season, and certainly one way or another we'll have a podcast with details of who our overall champion is, and hopefully get them on to speak to us.
Yeah, definitely. We will do something. It's at the moment we're just trying to find out what our end of season schedule looks like, because we've got a final analysis show to look back on the 3 games post Fulham and how the end of our season went. Like Dave says, we've got to catch up on our FPL champion. We've got a interview coming, I think, towards the back end of next week with a panel of the local journalists who are going to come on to take their take on the season. So we've got all sorts going on. So stay tuned to social media, and we will keep you updated as to what is coming next. Okay, so it only leaves us now then to wrap up the end of the preview show, Dave, where we normally give our listeners a quiz question. But what are we going to do about a quiz question this week?
Well, we did mention earlier we rather unfairly left our listeners in suspense with a quiz question in our final preview show of last season. So we have decided not to set an end-of-season quiz question for this episode. However, if you'd like to improve your Clarets knowledge over the summer, then the biggest online repository of details from past Burnley matches can be found in the Burnley Stats match database, which has been the basis for much of the content in our preview shows throughout the season. As well as past match results and goal scorers, there's now a description for over 94% of past goals, including 100% coverage of those descriptions for the last 25 seasons. If you want to go and take a look, the following shortcut is the best one to use. It's that's bit.ly/Burnleystats. And of course, you could try to use Google. Other search engines are available. But when all the relevant information has already been compiled into one massive Clarets database, then why bother?
Exactly. Why bother? But that's it then, Dave. I think that concludes our final preview show of the season, doesn't it? Do we have any other business or any community news that we need to share?
One thing I did want to include at the end, with it being our last preview show of the season, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's taken the time to download and listen to this series of preview show podcasts during this unusual season. In particular, it's been great to hear from everyone who's interacted with us. That's either in terms of submitting their quiz answers or just getting in touch with feedback. We must also thank all of our special guests who've recorded with us, as well as those listeners who submitted recordings of their matchday memories. We're extremely grateful to the fans of opposition teams as well, who generously provide us with their insight. Finally, I just want to say a big thank you to my regular co-host, to you, Natalie, for trying and mostly succeeding to keep me in order. And also to Matt Moss, our producer, who does so much behind the scenes to keep things running. We do hope to continue these preview show podcasts during next season, and we'll be in discussions over the summer to see how we can keep things fresh for you for Burnley's 6th consecutive season in the Premier League.
Oh, that's a lovely way to end the preview show, Dave. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. This is our 2nd preview show season, and I love it. I love the preview show, and as Dave touched on there, I do hope we can keep it going next season, because I just think it's a really unusual way to build up to the game, and I just think it's great fun. And also, the Fantasy Premier League, I think, has been a great addition as well, and the quiz all about it is just a really good show. So thanks to you, Dave. I think more than anything, I don't want to keep you in check, because I think you're very, very good at what you do. And I do echo that, listeners. If you can check out Dave's stats database, it's absolutely phenomenal. The amount of work he puts in there, and the sheer volume of information you've got at your fingertips. So do check that out. I think the other thanks we just need to add on to that is, of course, Turf Moor Stadium announcer Dominic Walker for his specially recorded preview show announcements. Thanks from me as well to producer Matt, just for everything he does behind the scenes this season. It's been a very chaotic season for us this season, because fixtures have been thick and fast. Most people have been in lockdown. We've not always been able to get scheduled podcasts on when we could do. And I don't underestimate the impact that producer Matt has had on keeping us all together and keeping us motivated and organised and just being proactive in doing things. He has definitely kept us going this season 100%, and we are very, very lucky to have him. So, yeah, my thanks as ever to Matt and to Dave, obviously, who I've already mentioned. Final thanks, as always, go to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this episode. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. That is Natalie Bromley and Dave Roberts signing off for a season of the No Nay Never preview show. Take care of yourselves. Have a fantastic summer. We will see you next season. This has been the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.